In February 2026, inside the walls of Her Majesty's Prison, Frankland, one of the UK's most secure prisons, convicted child murderer Ian Huntley was attacked by another inmate, convicted murderer Anthony Russell. The assault happened in the prison workshop, where Russell struck Huntley repeatedly with a metal bar. Huntley was rushed to hospital with catastrophic head injuries. Days later, after doctors confirmed he was in a vegetative state, his life support was switched off. For many, the name Ian Huntley is synonymous with horror. He was the man responsible for the murders of 10-year-old Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in 2002, a crime that shook the UK to its core. Huntley was a predator, a manipulator, and a killer. But the fact that he died at the hands of another violent offender doesn't make that offender a hero. Anthony Russell is not a vigilante, and he is not the embodiment of justice. He is a convicted murderer and rapist, already serving a long sentence inside the same high-security prison. Russell's actions weren't justice. They were simply more violence carried out by someone who is already proven capable of inflicting immense damage. I want to be clear about why I'm talking about this case. Over the past few weeks, I've seen a wave of people online praising Anthony Russell for killing Ian Huntley. And look, I'm not here to defend Huntley. I don't think anyone is shedding tears over his death, and I'm certainly not. But acknowledging that doesn't mean we should start celebrating the person who killed him. Because Anthony Russell isn't a hero. He's a convicted murderer, a rapist, and a man whose own crimes destroyed multiple lives long before he ever crossed paths with Huntley. Praising him doesn't make the world safer, and it doesn't honour the victims of either men. Now on to the episode. If you enjoy these episodes, I encourage you to follow or subscribe to Criminal Interrupted on your favourite podcast app. As I've mentioned before, I'm currently focusing on this podcast full-time due to a heart condition, so every follow and review makes a huge difference. Thank you for listening and for your incredible support. This is Criminal Interrupted. Before we talk about Ian Huntley's death, we need to revisit who he was. The Soham murders were a double child murder committed in Soham, Cambridgeshire on the 4th of August 2002. The victims were two 10-year-old girls, Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Amy Chapman. Holly and Jessica were simply two little girls enjoying their summer holidays. Holly was gentle, thoughtful, and close to her family. She loved music, spending time with friends, and had a warm, shy smile that people remembered instantly. Jessica was lively and outgoing, the more talkative of the pair, full of energy and humour. The two were inseparable, best friends who spent their days laughing, taking photos, and doing what two 10-year-old girls do in a world that still feels safe to them. That afternoon, the girls were lured into the home of a local school caretaker, Ian Huntley. Huntley had positioned himself as a trusted adult in the community, someone the children recognised from school, and someone who appeared safe to them. Once inside, Huntley murdered them, most likely by asphyxiation, though the exact sequence of events has never been fully established due to the conditions of the bodies when they were found. After killing the girls, Huntley transported their remains out of Soham and dispersed them in an isolated irrigation ditch near RAF Lakeheath in Suffolk. He attempted to conceal the crime by burning their clothing and cleaning his home, while publicly participating in the search and giving media interviews in the days that followed. Their remains were discovered 13 days later, on the 17th of August 2002, after what became one of the most intense and extensive missing person searches in British criminal history. In the days leading up to the discovery, suspicion had already begun to turn towards Ian Huntley. His behaviour during the search had raised quiet concerns among investigators. There were inconsistencies in his statements, an unusual level of involvement in the public appeals, and forensic traces inside his home didn't align with his explanations. When forensic teams examined Huntley's house more closely, they found evidence of an attempted cleanup. Fibers matching the girls' clothing were discovered, and investigators noted that Huntley had recently replaced parts of the carpet. His girlfriend, Maxine Carr, had also provided him with a false alibi, claiming he was with her at the time of the girls' disappearance, a statement she later admitted was untrue. Huntley was arrested and charged with the murders, and Carr was charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice. The trial began in November 2003 at the Old Bailey. Huntley denied murder, but admitted the girls had died in his home, claiming their deaths were accidental, a defense the jury rejected. On the 17th of December 2003, he was convicted of both murders and sentenced to 2 life terms. The High Court later set a minimum tariff of 40 years, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Carr was convicted of providing a false alibi and sentenced to 3.5 years. For more than 2 decades, Huntley remained one of the most despised criminals in the UK, serving his sentence inside high-security prisons. Long before the fatal attack in 2026, Ian Huntley had been a marked man inside the UK prison system. Because of the nature of his crimes, he was one of the most despised inmates in the country, and that made him a frequent target for violence. In 2005, while held at HMP Wakefield, Huntley was attacked by another prisoner who threw boiling water over him, leaving him with burns to his face and neck. The attacker later said he did it because Huntley was a child killer. The incident forced the prison service to move Huntley for his own safety. A year later, in 2006, Huntley attempted to take his own life by overdosing on antidepressants. Then, in 2010, while serving time at HMP Frankland, Huntley was slashed across the neck and face with a makeshift weapon by another inmate. He required hospital treatment, and the attack reinforced what prison staff already knew. Keeping Huntley alive was an ongoing challenge. He was frequently moved, often segregated, and constantly monitored because the risk of further violence was so high. So, to understand why the death of Ian Huntley cannot be framed as justice, we also need to look closely at the man accused of killing him, Anthony Russell. Russell wasn't acting out some twisted sense of justice. He was, and is, a deeply violent offender. His past makes it clear that this wasn't a righteous act by a better man. It was simply one dangerous individual inflicting more violence on another. Anthony Russell, born on the 16th of April 1982, is a British murderer, spree killer, and a convicted rapist. His name first became widely known in October 2020, when he carried out a brutal series of killings across Coventry and Leamington Spa. Over the course of just a few days, Russell murdered 3 people, Julie Williams and her son David Williams, and 31-year-old Nicole McGregor, who was 18 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. For these crimes, he received a whole life order, one of the most severe sentences available in the UK, ensuring he will never be released from prison. Russell's spree began on 21st of October 2020 when he strangled 31-year-old David Williams with a lanyard. 2 days later, David's mother, 58-year-old Julie Williams, was reported missing after raising concerns about her son's disappearance. When police entered her Coventry home, they found Julie dead on the living room floor. She had suffered 113 separate injuries, including severe trauma to her head and neck. By the time offenders discovered her body, Russell had already fled the area. Police soon received a tip-off that Russell had confessed to killing both Julie and David. When officers raided his home, they found David's body hidden under a bed. Russell, meanwhile, had assaulted a 78-year-old man before stealing his money and mobile phone, injuring him in the process, and then used public transport to escape Coventry. A major manhunt followed. Russell travelled first to Kenilworth, where he robbed a 71-year-old woman of £200, dragging her along the ground during the attack. He then moved on to Leamington Spa. There, he lured 31-year-old Nicole McGregor to New Bold Common on the promise of supplying her with drugs. On the 26th of October, Russell raped and murdered her, leaving her body in dense undergrowth near the River Leam. She was found 3 days later, covered in scratches and bruises that indicated she'd been dragged through woodland. Even after killing McGregor, Russell continued his pattern of violence. He attacked a 75-year-old man in his home, almost killing him, and stole his car before fleeing the area once again. Russell was finally captured in the early hours of the 30th of October 2020 in Staffordshire. Police found him sleeping in the back seat of a stolen car near Burton-upon-Trent. When first questioned, he refused to cooperate, remaining silent with a blanket pulled over his head. Eventually, he admitted to all 3 murders, as well as robberies and the assault on the carjacking victim. However, he denied raping McGregor. Investigators later established that Russell had killed David Williams because he mistakenly believed David was in a relationship with his girlfriend. He then murdered Julie Williams because he feared she knew too much and might alert the police. Prosecutors then argued that he killed McGregor to prevent her from reporting the rape. In February 2022, Russell stood trial at Warwick Crown Court for the aggravated rape of Nicole McGregor. He chose not to give evidence. After more than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury was unable to reach a verdict and was discharged. A retrial took place in March 2022. This time, after hearing 3 days of evidence, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict in just over an hour. On the 11th of March 2022, Russell was sentenced for the rape, the 3 murders, and the associated robbery and assault charges. Just a quick note, under current UK law, an unborn baby is not counted as a murder victim, even in cases where the mother is killed while pregnant. He received a whole life prison term for each murder, meaning he will never be eligible for parole, along with additional lengthy sentences for other offences. The sentencing judge described him as, quote, exceptionally dangerous and manipulative, end quote. Russell refused to attend the hearing, and staff reported that attempts to move him had placed them in situations of danger. By early 2026, Ian Huntley had been in prison for more than 2 decades. He was held at HMP Frankland in County Durham, a high-security prison that houses some of the UK's most dangerous offenders, and it was inside those walls on the 26th of February 2026 that Huntley's life came to a violent end. That morning, Huntley was working in the prison workshop when he was attacked by another inmate. Reports later confirmed that he had been struck repeatedly with a metal bar, causing catastrophic head injuries. Staff intervened and Huntley was rushed to hospital, but the damage was irreversible. After days on life support, doctors determined he was in a vegetative state, and on the 7th of March, his life support was withdrawn. Not long after the attack, Anthony Russell, already serving a whole life sentence for the triple murder and rape of Nicole McGregor, was identified as the prisoner accused of carrying out the assault. According to early reports, the incident began during a work assignment, escalating into a sudden and brutal attack. The exact circumstances remain the subject of ongoing legal proceedings, but what is clear is that Huntley suffered fatal injuries as a result of the blows inflicted in that workshop. On the 10th of March 2026, Russell was formally charged with Huntley's murder. And this is where the public reaction becomes complicated. Some people were quick to celebrate the news, framing it as a kind of poetic justice, a monster killing another monster. But that narrative ignores the reality of who Anthony Russell is. He is not a hero, he is not an avenger, he is a man whose own crimes were so violent and so destructive that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Huntley's death at his hands was not justice. It was simply another act of violence committed by someone already known for extreme brutality. And to be clear, I'm not mourning Ian Huntley. I don't care that he's dead. If anything, I would have preferred he lived out the rest of his life exactly as he deserved to. Terrified, isolated, and forced to confront what he did every single day. But that's not why I'm telling this story. I'm talking about this because I've seen too many people have turned Russell into some kind of hero, and it's important to understand who he actually is. If people are going to celebrate him, they should at least know the truth about the kind of monster they're cheering for. Thank you for listening.